Good evening, members, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Councillor Mark Evans, and I'll be chairing this meeting of the Planning Committee. Before we start, I will remind you that these proceedings are being recorded. By your presence here, you consent to that process. And also to remind you that anything you do say will be immediately available in the public domain. I've introduced myself. To my right is
Councillor Bob Cope, I'm Vice Chairman.
to my left.
My name is Pardip Sharma and I'm the Planning Solicitor.
Helen Bembo, Development Management Team Manager.
Good evening, everybody. Annette Roberts, Corporate Director, Place and Communities.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
Amanda Willis, Technical Support Team.
I do apologise. You must have snuck in at the last minute. Okay, the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting of the 18th of July. Members, if you were present at the meeting and deemed them a true and correct record of what took place, will you please signify? Thank you. Is any to the contrary? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. I will sign those minutes. Okay, the next item is to record any apologies. Thank you very much. Next item is declarations of interest, members.
Just to say that I'm making aware that Andrew Abden, this is my husband, but we aren't joined at the hip. I always make my own decisions, and tonight I'll certainly wait to hear what everything's said and then make my own mind.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Are you okay with that photo? Okay. Okay, the next item is the determination of planning applications. The first one we're going to look at is application number 22/00936/FUL. This is land at Littlewood Farm, Toft Lane, Coppenhall, Staffordshire. The installation of a ground-mounted solar array and associated infrastructure. Helen.
Thank you, Chairman. So before Helen presents the application to the committee this evening, and before we hear from the speakers for and against the application, I feel that it is important to clarify to all that the purpose of the Planning Committee is to consider all issues raised in the officer's report, to hear the positions for and against, for committee members to debate the planning merits and to make their decision impartially, taking into account the merits and material planning matters of the proposal in front of us this evening. I'm also aware that a site visit took place yesterday where members were able to see the site and any impacts. The purpose of the site visit is to appraise councillors of the application site and its surroundings, explain issues, clarify any matters concerning the application, and to verify matters raised by representations on the application. As set out in the planning protocol for site visits, it is not the purpose of the site inspection to hear representation from any parties, onlookers, objectors, supporters, applicants or agents. The statutory consultation period, along with the opportunity to speak at planning committee, provides the appropriate opportunities for interested parties to give their views. And also, before members vote this evening, I will ask the chairman to clarify with all members that they have the information they feel necessary on which to make a decision. I'll pass you over to Helen to present the application.
Thanks, Annette. Thank you, Chair. The site consists of around 71 hectares of arable farmland and is situated around 1 mile southwest of Coppenhall village. The site is within a rural area characterised by open fields. The application seeks permission for a solar installation with a generation capacity of approximately 40 megawatts, generating enough power for approximately 9,330 homes. The development would involve the installation of the solar panels themselves, which would be mounted at an angle on frames, along with a series of inverters, CCTV cameras, perimeter fencing and a substation which would connect into an existing pylon. The site is within the open countryside and the proposals would have material impact on the character and appearance of the landscape. However, this impact would soften over time with the maturing of the biodiversity zones. An agricultural land classification report has been submitted, which confirms that around 40 to 44% of the site is good quality agricultural land. This is grade 3A. A further 10% is grade 2, which is very good quality land. The area not surveyed has also been assumed for robustness to also benefit as best and most versatile land, which is known as BMV. The total area of BMV would equate to around 54%. However, there is considered to be ample provision of good quality land in this part of the district, so there are no undue concerns regarding food production. There are 2 listed structures in the vicinity of the site, most notably the Toft to the northeast. The plans have been amended to pull the development away from the boundary with the Toft, and a landscape buffer is proposed to screen the development. The proposal would result in less than substantial harm to this heritage asset, which must be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. Whilst provision of agricultural land, food production and landscape character is clearly important, the NPPF and UK legislation sets out the clear government commitment to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and South Staffs Council, along with many other councils, have declared a climate emergency. In line with the NPPF, local planning authorities should approve applications for renewables if its impact can be acceptable. Council's recent Sustainable Construction and Renewable Energy topic paper also highlights the need for a sustained increase in solar development. The application has been amended through the course of the application process to reduce the impact on highway safety, ecological issues, residential amenity and the heritage assets. In the balance of considerations, it is considered that the development's potential contribution to climate change is a significant factor weighing in favour of the proposals. Accordingly, the recommendation to members this evening is for approval. It is recommended that permission is granted for a temporary period of 40 years, after which time the equipment can be removed and the site can revert back to its agricultural use. So I'm just going to flick through a few photographs of the site that were taken as part of the case officer's site visit. So the one on the left-hand side is the view looking northwest from the junction of Levedale Road and Whittamore Lane. The one on the right-hand side is again at the junction, and for those who were at the site visit where we stopped on our first point yesterday. There's some general views across the site from Levedale Road, those 3 pictures there. And this is taken from the northeast corner looking towards the site, and the Toft there is located in the foreground. Views from the site to the south looking past the Toft cottage, and again from the northwest looking past the Toft cottage. These are taken from Google Street View imaging. This is a site location plan and also site plan that shows the location of the solar array shaded there in blue, shows the rights of way which will remain across the site and the location of the surrounding properties. The Toft is just here, as we saw on the photographs. This is a slide that shows the BMV, so the best and most versatile land as submitted as part of the application, and then a wider area which shows a plan from Natural England showing the wider scope of the BMV within the wider area. Recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Helen. So you've heard the application presented by the officer. We have a number of speakers, and first I'll call upon Mr. Chapman, who's going to be speaking for the application. Mr. Chapman. Mr. Chapman, as discussed earlier, it's 5 minutes, and we will be quite strict on that. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Chair, members and officers. Thank you for allowing the opportunity on behalf of the applicant to speak. The application is in respect of the installation of a solar farm comprising ground-mounted photovoltaic panels and associated infrastructure. The applicant has secured a viable connection to the grid, which is critical in determining the position of solar farms. The importance of this cannot be underestimated. The proposed solar farm will provide a generating capacity of around 40 megawatts per annum, which equates to the average consumption of circa 9,300 typical family homes. Permission is requested for a period of 40 years, after which the land will return to its current state. The application has been submitted by Elgin, who have a proven track record for developing solar parks sympathetically within the countryside throughout the UK and Ireland. Prior to the submission of the application, a request for pre-application advice was made to South Staffordshire Council. Their response concluded that there would be likely support for the proposal from a policy point of view, subject to the criteria set out in policy OC1, and a landscape visual impact assessment should form part of the application. During the pre-application stage, the applicant engaged with the local community and a public exhibition was held in September 2022. The exhibition was attended by 38 people and 4 written responses were received. Following the pre-application consultation with the council and the public engagement, the layout design of the proposal has been amended. In accordance with the pre-application advice, the application was supported by a comprehensive suite of technical documents. Some of these reports have been updated and additional reports provided in order to respond to the comments that were made in the consultation responses. This response has meant that the statutory consultees have shown overwhelming support for the proposed development. We would like to highlight that ongoing positive discussions that have taken place during the application's assessment, the applicant has worked closely with the case officer in order to respond to consultation responses. In terms of the application, we would highlight the following. The principle of solar development accords with the government plans and national policies to deliver net zero and decarbonise the economy, and the assessment considers that this is an appropriate location for a solar farm. Whilst concerns have been raised with regards to loss of agricultural land, we would highlight that the proposal is for a temporary use, after which it would be restored back to its current state. The land would continue to be in agricultural use in the form of animal grazing. While the site is in use as a solar farm, it would enable the soil to regenerate after years of intensive agriculture, and the site is located outside sensitive boundaries like Greenbelt. Furthermore, importantly, the solar farm development will contribute to the sustainable development and reduction of CO2 emissions, which is supported by both national and local policies. In support of the application, a landscape and visual impact assessment has been prepared and has been an integral part of the application's assessment, which concluded that overall the character of the landscape will be maintained and the proposal can be accommodated without significant effect. The application also included a range of ecological reports, which have been assessed by the council's ecologist to demonstrate that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on the site's ecology. The proposal would not result in a significant loss of habitats of principal importance, and in fact would result in significant biodiversity net gain, significantly exceeding the 10% requirement. In response to the council's conservation areas comments, the layout of the proposal has been revised. As the level of harm to the heritage asset has been assessed to be less than substantial harm, paragraph 202 of the NPF advised that this harm can be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. The public benefits of the scheme are considered to be the generation of renewable energy, the reduction of emissions that is derived from solar energy, temporary and full reversible nature of the scheme, and additional biodiversity gains. Once operational, the development would generate few vehicle movements. However, there would be an intense period during the construction, which is expected to last about 16 weeks. The Construction Transport Management Plan provides detail of the levels of traffic that will be generated throughout the construction phase and proposes a temporary traffic management order which will manage traffic and mitigate transport effects. The local highways authority is satisfied with the level of information and has raised no concern. To summarise, the applicant has secured a connection to the grid. The constituent responses are overwhelmingly supportive of the proposal and the wider benefits, including its contribution to supply of renewable energy, reduction of CO2 emissions, and its temporal reversible nature and biodiversity net gain. These positive benefits are considered to be significant and outweigh the potential adverse impacts. As such, the proposed development accords with national and local policies. Thank you. That's a bit loud.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Chapman, and for keeping within the time. I think that surprised everybody, including myself. I now call upon Mr. David Martin to speak against the application. Mr. Martin is described as a neighbour. Sir.
An application involving alternative energy does not give carte blanche in terms of development location. Any development, but most certainly one of such enormity and impact of this, must crucially be in the appropriate place. The open and rich agricultural fields of this appeal site are a wholly inappropriate location for the proposed development. When considering local and national policy, recent Section 78 appeal decisions and errors within the application, you should make the right decision tonight and refuse this application. Firstly, local policy, your policy. The adopted local plan supports a refusal. The site is unquestionably within open countryside. You have seen it. An expanse of valuable food producing fields with a distinctive rural character. Your development plan has specific protections for locations such as this, and the application is contrary to it. The protection and maintenance of open countryside is stated in the plan's strategic objectives 1, 3 and 4, and are therefore fundamental plan aims. The application is in direct conflict with specific plan policies, including CP1 regarding the settlement hierarchy, where development is severely restricted in this area. These villages and hamlets are not considered suitable locations for development and focuses for very limited change. Policy OC1 confirms that the open countryside will be protected for its own sake, particularly for its landscape and agricultural value. Policy EQ6, while this does give provision in the plan for renewable energy in South Staffordshire, proposed locations for this are included in the plan, and this site is not within those areas. Coming secondly to national policy support to refuse the application. The government, when outlining its objectives and targets to attain that net carbon zero by 2050 that we've heard twice already, also acknowledged the need to ensure that projects come forward in appropriate locations. The topic of best and most versatile agricultural land is a key component of determining appropriate and inappropriate locations. The site comprises at least half best and most versatile agricultural land, which is protected by national policy from significant and inappropriate development. On this topic, the 2015 written ministerial statement relating to the unjustified use of agricultural land remains relevant. It states, any proposal for a solar farm involving best and most versatile agricultural land would require to be justified by the most compelling evidence. Such compelling evidence does not exist here. Furthermore, it states meeting our energy goals should not be used to justify the wrong development in the wrong location, and this includes the unnecessary use of high quality agricultural land. Development on this site is simply not necessary. Briefly touching on recent Section 78 solar appeal decisions, you may be aware of a few in 2023 where inspectors did overturn council's initial refusal. I ask you, do not be afraid of these or let them unduly influence your decision tonight. You are not deciding those applications. Those turned on their individual facts and can be differentiated from the site before you. East Hanningfield, land south of Leeming Substation, Winterton Solar Farm, all had less than a majority of best and most versatile land. They had 6%, 2% and 0% best and most versatile land. We've got a site here that's 54%, vastly different. One comparable case to be aware of is land north of Lullington from July this year. Inspector Thomas dismissed the appeal following council refusal. Weighing greater in his planning balance than the renewable energy contribution was the protection of best and most versatile land. That site had at least 50% best and most versatile land, like our site. He stated, as have other respecters, that 40-year schemes do not constitute a temporary change. These changes are generational. He stated that the application would create an unacceptable indent in vital, high-quality food-producing farming land. Turning briefly to the application, it had a fundamental error when submitted to you regarding best and most versatile land. It stated the majority of the land did not comprise best and most versatile land. 4 months later, we got 6 amended documents, an amended land classification, which then said, no, actually, it is a majority of best and most versatile land. That didn't come from any retesting. It came because residents probed and questioned, and there was found to be an error. The amended document was also called Land at Tuckey Farm, Wilmslow. Nothing to do with that eroding confidence that you can have in the application. I respectfully urge you, given all the above justification, to protect our countryside and refuse the application tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Martin, and for keeping within the time. I now call upon Councillor Andrew Adams to address the committee.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Committee and members of the public from Coppenhall, Dunstan, Levedale, thank you for attending. I'm also grateful to those members of the Planning Committee who were able to attend the site visit. It was enlightening to see what 170 acres in the countryside looks like. Awesomely beautiful. I think it's pertinent to point out that this application is the tip of an iceberg, with Brood, Coven, local villages also facing a barrage of applications. It seems that wherever the National Grid pylons are sited, a planning application is just round the corner. A major part of this application gives me significant concern in the use of BMV land, best and most versatile land, as this type of land is protected by central government regulation and policy. The percentage of BMV, best and most versatile land, in this application is unacceptable. Committee members are aware of these figures and no doubt will debate these going forward. I have concerns about the accuracy and quantity of the lower graded land. This land was offered for sale by a leading agricultural agent not long ago, and it stated good quality land with significant yields, wheat, barley and rapeseed. And this document is available for you to see as committee members. We accept that we need to take strides in producing clean and green energy, but not at the cost of sacrificing good, high-yielding agricultural land. We as a nation will be overloaded with energy, but in a situation of being in food poverty. A further significant concern is the latest application by another energy company seeking to install a further 150 acres of solar panels in less than 1.5 miles away from this site, plus also an application for battery storage. These developments will change the character and appearance of the landscape, and the cumulative effect of this should be considered. Another area I'd like the committee to discuss, please. I will leave the committee to discuss the impact statement. Flooding. The NRA have no reports of flooding. If you ask any of the residents here, they will categorically state that the Levedale Road has been flooded on numerous occasions when polytunnels were in situation on this land. Polytunnels were used to grow the strawberries, which are grown on best and most valuable land. Solar panels will have the significantly greater impact on flooding on this road, which is one access route to all of the homes that live there. There are numerous documents to this application, and there are also documents relating to other applications of interest. But as our planners have pointed out, that in planning, there's no such thing as a precedent, binding or persuasive. You as councillors make the decision tonight. To summarise, best and most versatile land, the cumulative impact, material impact, and 40 years, and there is no guarantee of what this soil and land will be like in 40 years. Thank you for hearing my concerns and my objections from what is a layman. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Thank you. Okay, members, you've heard the application presented by Helen, and you've heard 3 speakers on that application. I'm now going to invite you to ask questions of the officers through me about that application. Members, any questions to be directed to the officers? Okay. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Under 1.2 site history, previous planning applications, there was a 22/01119/EIASCR request for screening opinion. Regulation 6 of the Town and Country Planning Act. Could somebody explain to me what that is?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Steele. Officers?
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair. So that's just a request that's made to the local planning authority to screen the site and the proposed developments to see if it constitutes an EIA development. So whether it has an environmental impact or not. If we screen it to say that it does, it's then a longer application process of 16 weeks rather than the statutory consultation period of 13. In this case, it was screened to say that it wasn't going to have any severe environmental impact, and therefore it didn't have to progress any further. But that's just a process that we undertake to make sure that the full consideration is given to the environmental impacts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Steele, does that answer your question?
Well, it's the use of the word screening, you see. To me, the word screening doesn't actually mean looking at. It means camouflaging something. So that's what I wanted you to point out.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Screening is just the central government terminology that's used. It isn't screening as in disguising or covering up, it's screening as in reviewing. Where that terminology has come from is simply from the legislative framework. It's not meant in any other pretense, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
So is it somewhat similar to outline planning permission?
Helen?
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's not a type of permission that's granted. It's just a view on whether there's likely to be an environmental impact. So it's not a consent that gives any permission to use the land. It's just an opinion from the local planning authority. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Steele?
So it sort of carries no weight in this debate.
Not in the decision-making process for this application. It was just a view on that particular element of it. So no, it doesn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Thank you, Helen. Members? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question and an observation. So I want to refer to the officers with regard to EQ4, protecting and enhancing the character and appearance of landscape. So my concern is that proposed development is 10 kilometres from Cannock Chase, and does this set a precedent for more agricultural land being developed and losing the characteristics of our beautiful countryside in South Staffordshire, please?
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Officers?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we'd have to look at each case on its merits, as you would expect me to say. But in terms of the Chase, the relevant consultation has been undertaken and there's no concerns that have been raised there. With regards to the impact on the landscape, yes, we've got relevant policies that look at that, and that's what we have to look at in the round and in the balancing exercise that we'll do this evening when we make the decision. The documentation that was submitted with the application took some key views and vistas to look at the impact. It's clear from that documentation, and that is supported by officers and is referred to in the update list, that there will be some impact from the close proximity of the photovoltaics themselves, as there are rights of way that pass through the site. So we can ensure landscaping is done and screening is put in place. When you walk through the site, that becomes difficult, but the distant views of it are quite well screened. Those of you who were on the site visit will have noted that along the two main roads there's quite high hedges in place. It's quite well screened from that level. So it's just a case of making a judgment on each of those views and then putting that into the balance.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. So I've never been to Coppenhall before. It's absolutely beautiful. Loved it. And the countryside, absolutely stunning. Having gone through the papers today, I now realise that there is a turkey farm, which is quite ugly, on the opposite side of the lane. So the addition of a solar farm would result in significant detrimental and long-term change to the appearance and visual impact of the local area. In my view, a blot on the landscape. An industrial impression? Comment, please.
Ellen, you okay to answer that? More of an observation, the question. You okay to?
Yeah,
to field
in
it?
terms of the impact on the landscape, that's been balanced up in the report. The report's quite clear that there will be a change. Of course, there will be a change to the landscape. You know, you've gone from the countryside to adding in the infrastructure, but that has to be balanced up against the benefits of the scheme, and that's what the officer's done. So I don't think there's any indication that we are not acknowledging there will be a change on the landscape. Of course, there will be, but that's balanced against the wider benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Chapman. Okay, members, any other member wish to ask any questions of the officers through me, members? Okay, well, thank you for those questions and thank you, officers, for fielding them. I'll now open it up to debate, to observations and comments from the members. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the officers for the comprehensive reports and for the speakers. Much appreciated. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the site visit yesterday, but what I ascertain is there are no sort of genuine planning reasons why it shouldn't be approved. That's just a comment I want to make from my sort of reading the documents and what I've ascertained tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those observations. Podium. Okay, sorry. Councillor Perry.
Thank you very much. I've listened to the reasons from the floor. I've read the report through a few times, and I'm just looking at that picture on the screen there, and it's just a blot on the landscape as far as I'm concerned, sorry. Whilst I agree we require renewable energy, it's met all the criteria, so I can't give a planning reason why not. It's an observation, which why we're in debate now. As has already been said, we need renewable energy, but not at any cost, not of cost of agricultural land. We need food as well. So I think there's a balance here to be made, one way or the other, and I'm sure we'll be making that balance when we have our vote. I'm just putting my points of view as I see it at the moment. I've wrote a few notes down, sorry about this. We pride ourselves in South Staffordshire on retaining our Greenbelt policy. The gentleman that spoke afterwards quoted a number of reasons why from out of our own policies, why it shouldn't go ahead. So from my point of view, I haven't heard anything yet that sort of would make me want to agree with what's happening there, because as has been said already, a floodgate will open of our beautiful countryside, which is actual, and I read about the flooding issues and everything. And yes, when it comes to people giving their views, you have to live in an area to know whether you get flooding or not. Believe you me, I know that. So I'm just making these observations as I'm sitting here listening to the debate now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Heseltine.
Thank you. One of my concerns is this 40-year lifespan, and the design of the equipment is reversible. What exactly does that mean? The design of the equipment is reversible, and after which time it says the site could be decommissioned and returned to agricultural use. Well, through my experience with the open cast mines in Cheslin Hay, it's never returned to how it was previously. It can't possibly be. So I'd like some clarification on that if possible, please.
Thank you, Councillor Heseltine. Helen, I understand you wish to come back on a point raised by Councillor Perry.
I can do it together. In answer to your question, yeah, it would be decommissioned, which means the solar panels removed from the site. The recommendation this evening is to give it a consent only for the 40-year period. So after the 40 years, it would have to be decommissioned and the land returned. The panels, as we've already discussed, doesn't restrict grazing underneath, so that can still go on, and it does allow the soil to regenerate to get back to a higher quality, because obviously it's been subject to a lot of crops and growing. So that's what it means by decommission. So it would be removed completely and then could return to whatever use previously, planting, growing of crops. Just for a point of clarity, I just wanted to come back. It's not green belt in this location. Yeah, it was just, yeah, so open countryside, yeah, but not green belt. And in regard to other applications, we have to be careful here because we have to take each case on its merits. If we do have additional applications coming forward within a locality, then a cumulative impact assessment can be taken with regard to views and impact on the visual appearance of not only the site but the wider area. At the moment, we're only dealing with this one on its merits. So I just wanted to make that point of clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, officers, for preparing the report. I've listened to both sides of this argument. My huge and abiding concern is the best and most versatile land, 54%. That is an incredible amount of good quality farming land. And as somebody who works for farmers, I have real concerns about this. I appreciate having read through the report that you've prepared, and I've also appreciate what's been said both for and against this discussion or this application. But that's still sitting there in my throat at the moment, of 54% loss of really good quality growing land. Appreciate it's used, and it was mentioned in one of the presentations. Appreciate that in the area there is a lot of other land used for the growing of food. I'm just not sure why we should lose for 40 years good quality growing land. That's the bit that's sticking with me at the moment. I really do want to save the world and I really do want to be green, but at any cost, I'm not sure on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Councillor Chapman.
Sorry about this, Chair. Okay. Well, the whole site sits within local open countryside, and once destroyed, it cannot be recovered. I have to assure you that I do think green, but this is appalling. Okay. It would fundamentally change the character of the natural environment in the area, contrary to national plans to preserve arable land for future food production. So the proposed site may lead to localised flooding in the fields and lanes because the solar panels may interrupt the flow of rainwater and prevent it from soaking away as it naturally would if the field were planted with crops. Possible adverse consequences for the neighbourhood, as the area would then be potential for residential and industrial developments. Now that really does concern me. Noise, peace and quiet would be destroyed by industrial grade traffic and light pollution affecting the residences of Dunstan Heath and Coppenhall. The proposal contradicts the hierarchical approach within the core strategy, Core Policy 1, which sets out a strategy to direct development towards the larger villages and brownfield sites and away from the more sensitive rural areas such as here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other member? Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Is that close enough? I have to say that I do support solar farms and battery energy, but it has to be in the right place. I don't consider that this application is in the right place. Now, if you look at page 32, our officer on the report, I don't know whether everybody's got an hard copy, but the officer on the report mentions the key issues. Now, for me, the key issues, number one, the effect of the proposed development on the use of best and most versatile agricultural land, including consideration of site selection processes. I'm not talking about, and I know I've done some homework on this, to the applicant. I'm not talking about alternative sites. I'm talking about the selection of this site and whether you've tested all the area around it. I did hear that one of our officers said there weren't undue concerns about food production. I've got big concerns about the food production. One of the key issues is climate change. Now, we import 40% of all our food from abroad. That food has to get to us on train, rail or planes. That affects climate change as well. So in the balance, food production and the fact that we're having to import it is as important as climate change using these solar energy. So that has to be weighed in the balance. I do agree with what the neighbour had to say, David Martin. I also have read the planning appeal. Now, this may be a bit long-winded, but I'll go through it. We're talking now, before I go into this, I could ask the officers to put that particular illustration on the screen. That is an analysis of this complete site. Now, everything to the right, and I'll give you the colour code, everything to the right is light blue, sky blue, is better quality. That's grade 2 land. Dark green is grade 3A and light green is 3B. Now, the applicant has said the majority of this site is 3B, but when you look at, you add grade 2 and 3A together, the majority of the site is actually BMV, best quality at 54%. Now, I don't know whether anybody's ever used an optimizer, but if you look at, there's a red line on there, can you spot that red line? That's the area where the solar panels are going. It's all to the right-hand side, to the eastern side of the site, the red line. If you were to draw an imaginary line from where the patches of green, dark green on the right, in a straight line, I'd say majority of land to the left, which takes less BMV land, is more appropriate than what the applicant has chosen. It's not optimised correctly, and therefore I raise big question marks about that. Now I'll go into what I was going to say, and this best and most versatile agricultural land, which I have lifted from one of the appeals, and we need to consider it. This was mentioned by the neighbour that spoke. It's the written ministerial statement dated the 25th of March 2015. It states therein that any proposal for a solar farm involving the best and most versatile agricultural land, BMV, would require to be justified by the most compelling evidence. Now that's a material consideration. It's come from a government minister. Whether the proposed use of the agricultural land is shown to be necessary, whether poorer quality land is being used in preference to higher quality land. This is reflected in the National Planning Policy Framework, which suggests that where significant development of agricultural land is demonstrated to be necessary, areas of poorer quality land should be preferred to those of higher quality, which is the point I was making about that map. Now, in the NPPF, on paragraph 174B of the framework, it states that planning decisions should recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, which is what Councillor Chapman was saying, including the economic and other benefits of best and most versatile land. Again, that's in the NPPF, it's policy. The Site Selection Assessment, SSA, fixed the area for the proposal by a requirement to connect to a viable electrical network. That where they're fixing it is to the right-hand side at the top of the map. That's where they're going into the grid. And that was agreed with the grid people. But according to this appeal, this inspector that I'm quoting from looked at the area around the site itself. In other words, those other fields, those peripheral fields that are on that map, has any of that been tested, whether it's poorer quality land? I don't think it has, and it should have been. It is clear that a robust assessment has not been made of grading this agricultural land. And the evidence has failed to demonstrate there is no land available for this development within that area of a lesser agricultural quality, which is contrary to national and local policy. It also does not stand up to scrutiny as the compelling evidence in this ministerial letter. Therefore, the evidence fails to demonstrate there is no suitable poorer quality areas of land. 54% of this land is BMV land. And while the benefits arising from the scheme are significant, the harm that would be caused by allowing the development of over 54% of the site's hectareage over a period of 40 years would be of great significance. This inspector also mentioned that period of 40 years. As he said, it's a generational change. That's 40 years of loss of this land. And as somebody said, our local member, we're going to have to consider more of these. But as they all build up, that's 40 years of not best agricultural land, when we needn't do that if we can find poorer quality land. And this applicant hasn't done that. Just go on to some of the comments the applicant actually made. This is Elgin Energy. In response to some of our questions, they did put out a communication to us. And they did say that it complied with various things, including compatibility with national and local planning policy. I hope I've just demonstrated it doesn't comply to the ministerial letter, EQ4 and paragraph 174B of the national framework. When I read English Nature, Natural England, and that's in the report, they'd mentioned that the substation, this is where you have to connect all the energy to on the site, the substation might permanently affect the BMB land, and consequently they don't feel it could be returned back to that quality. And that's a statement from a consultee to this application. Although the applicants put, furthermore, the proposed site is completely reversible and the site can be reinstated to its current nature following decommissioning. He's saying he considers it temporary, but 40 years is an awful long time. And as I said, it's a generational change and it won't be available for arable crops for food. The applicants then made comments about loss of BMV land, and in his comment he's put a small part of the solar PV farm will be on land that is designated as either 3A or 3B. Well, that's 54% and it's not a small part. He describes it as a small part. It's crackers, you know, what some of the statements they've made, and they had to readjust all the calculations. I'm sorry, applicant, I don't trust some of the things you say. And it's put, it's the most appropriate for the site and seeks to minimise the loss of BMV land. Well, it hasn't been optimised correctly on there, and you haven't looked at poorer quality land. And I'd therefore like to put a proposal of the reasons that I'm saying this should be refused. Number one, the ministerial letter, which is a material consideration, 2015. That's a consideration where we shouldn't be losing BMV land. Number 2, policy OC1, development on open countryside. It's against that policy. And paragraph 174B of the NPPF, it's against that. And also EQ4, protecting and enhancing the character and appearance of the landscape. Thank you very much. I know that was long-winded, but thanks for listening to me, members. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cope, thank you very much for that. And you've made a proposal. You've made a motion to
propose
okay.
refusal.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Cope, and thank you, members, for your patience. I was just ensuring that the motion was legally acceptable. And yes, it is. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Do I have the opportunity to second it, or do you put it to vote to the council? I would be delighted to second it. I feel very strongly about this particular one. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Chapman. So we have a motion which has been proposed, has been seconded. I will open that motion to debate and any observations, and I'll call on Helen, who wants to make some observations. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of a few points of clarity, we've talked about previous appeal decisions, and Councillor Cope has referred to one specific appeal decision, which, whilst the points that are picked out are relevant and need to be considered, as per the update list that was sent out to members, that appeal decision was included, so you will have had the opportunity to read that. Sat within the context of 5 others that were sent that didn't take that view. There's some questions from a development management perspective about the way that that decision has been formed. It was never challenged, so it stands, so it is a material consideration for you. But I just wanted to flag that it is dangerous territory to just rely on one appeal decision. Obviously, the decision is over to you, but just wanted to flag that for the purposes of robust decision making. And also the ministerial statements, the parts that were quoted were absolutely accurate, but just to give you the wider context of that particular statement, it also says that the use of the land has to be necessary, and I think we need to look at that against the backdrop of the climate emergency and no alternative brownfield sites being available. Poorer quality land has been used in preference, so there has been some assessment here about the land, and it is not all of the site that is BMV. Yes, it is 54%, but we need to look at that within the context of the wider site. There have been some amendments to this application by way of making sure there is no impact on the listed building for ecological benefit reasons and the fact that there's no previously developed land. And also the final part of the ministerial statement that I just wanted to flag was that it says allowed for continued agricultural use where acceptable and or where biodiversity improvements can be associated with the array. So the BNG, the biodiversity net gain calculations for this site are 61% net gain for habitats and 115% net gain for hedgerows. So all I wanted to do there was give you the wider context of that section of the ministerial statement, so you've got that to balance into your decision making. Yeah. In terms of the reasons that have been tabled by Councillor Cope, the policies were outlined, but that would need to be built on in order to frame them in the context of reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, anybody else want to make some observations? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask an officer to just unpack OC1 and the NPPF paragraph? How relevant is that to a planning decision and planning refusal or acceptance? What weight goes on those, please? Thank you.
Both relevant policies, both need to be considered as part of the decision making. How much weight you give them is down to the decision maker. You will see the way that the officers have framed their reason for approval and the reasons why they feel that when you consider all of the relevant planning policies and the ministerial statement in the round, the benefits outweigh the harm. So when looking at those two particular policies and specific regard to the MPPF, you need to decide where the weight goes as decision makers, and that is your remit here this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, is there any other member wish to make any observations or comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask for a clarification. I'm just looking for the particular paragraph, if you just bear with me. So, yeah, it was. Yeah, I'll say message. Right, in the report, it was section 4.02. It's stated that I've taken all factors into consideration that's considered to tip in the favour of. Does that actually mean? So it doesn't look like it was very much in it for refusal to acceptance. So can you explain what that means, tipping in favour of?
Thank you. Yeah, that all goes back to my previous comments about as a decision maker, you have to look at all the material planning considerations and decide where you put the weight. So when we talk about tipping the balance, you know, when we've discussed this in training before, imagine the weighing scales, the benefits, the harm, and how they are weighed together, and does the one outweigh the other? So what the officer has done in drafting her report is looked at all the material considerations and put the weight where she felt it was most appropriately apportioned, looking at all of those matters. So the conclusion then comes from an officer perspective that the benefits of the scheme outweigh the harm. We're not saying there's no harm. There absolutely is harm as a result of this, but it is outweighed by the benefits. So the harm related to the landscape impact and all the other elements considered are not outweighed by the benefits. So that's what we mean by tipping the balance. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Alan. Thank you, members. Just bear with us. We just want to discuss a few legal issues.
Chair, I just wanted to say that, you know, clearly this is a decision against officer recommendation, so your officers need to be clear that there are sound planning reasons for refusal, which are supported by evidence. I have heard the Vice Chair make a statement in relation to the reasons for refusal, which I have scribbled, but I do need these added to in terms of, you know, greater clarity, so your officers have sufficient evidence to pursue a potential appeal. And just bear with me. Yes, Chair, there was just one, given the background of the site visit yesterday and the issues that have occurred, the question that I just want to put to members is, do they feel that they have sufficient and all material evidence to come to a decision on this matter before it's taken to the vote?
Councillor Cope, do you want to come back on the issues raised by Party Player?
Yes. The decisions are as members, it's a recommendation from the officers, but the decision stops with us. I am confident that the reasons I've given, I lifted them from a planning appeal by an inspector. So if they're incorrect, that inspector's got his case wrong. And I notice even the neighbour was referring to it. And I'm confident they are sound reasons. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually saying that they're incorrect. I just wanted some elaboration. It wasn't an issue that your officers were saying that they were correct. It was just, it was important to make sure the full views of the committee were taken into account in those reasons for refusal. So if we could just review those reasons and ensure that, you know, they are elaborated on.
Well, Chairman, can the officers look at what 174B of the MPPF actually says? Yep, and I think I wrote, sorry. Yep, okay. Policy OC1, that's actually mentioned in the report, I believe. And EQ4 is mentioned. it's just a case that the officers didn't put so much weight on them. We're looking at balance of weight, and that's what the councillor there was saying. I feel there's more weight got to be put on these policies than the officers actually put in their balancing exercise when they came to the conclusion of recommending approval. I don't agree, and therefore it's up to the members to consider what that weight is.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. We'll just wait for the response.
So, Chair,
Councillor Steele.
if I may come in, Chair, if I may. Is that okay? Thank you. Thanks very much. I do feel that this particular application it will set a precedent if it goes through. So I'm going to repeat a few of the things I've said earlier on. It's going to be a blot on the landscape. And with regard to having the turkey farm there, with this, if this were to go through, it really will give an industrial impression of the countryside. The addition of the solar farm would result in significant detrimental and long-term change to the appearance and visual impact of the local area. So I want to go back again to EQ4, protecting and enhancing the character and appearance of the landscape. I'm going to just go through the first two paragraphs, and members will just have to forgive me. So throughout the district, the design and location of new development should take account of the characteristics and sensitivity of the landscape and its surroundings, and not have a detrimental effect on the immediate environment and on any important medium and long distance views. The siting, scale and design of new development will need to take full account of the nature and distinctive qualities of the local landscape. Coming to the end now, proposals should retain and strengthen components of landscape character and local distinctiveness, with particular attention to the detailing of any proposal and its relationship with existing buildings, features and vegetation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just to summarise then, so with regard to the policies that have been mentioned, we're talking about visual impact on the landscape, character of the wider area. Councillor Chapman, you mentioned long and distance views. In this context, looking at the information that was provided, the medium and long distance views that it was screened, you wouldn't be able to see that. But we could, if you're referring about those specific policies, we're looking at appearance and visual impact of the landscape and the character of the area. So is that correct in terms of what you are looking for with regard to those policies? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just so I could make sure I captured that correctly and I'm accurately reflecting the views of members. Thank you.
Okay, members. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad the word screening was used then. The screening will probably take 15 years before it's screening anything. There's nothing there at the moment. So I don't see how that can be taken into account. Anyway, let's get on to one of my favourite topics, planning balance. For the first time ever that I recall, I have asked for percentages in the past. We've actually got a percentage, and it's 54% of BMV land. So I think it's amazing. We've actually got a concrete percentage, which, opposing the laws that my learned friend here mentioned, 4.02, the balance is therefore, this is the officer's report, the balance is therefore considered to tip in favour of the application. Well, I say 54%, that tips it the other way. And as has been said, we are the decision makers here. We take into account the officer's report, take into account the site visit. And we're on the tip of an avalanche of these sort of applications. If we pass this one tonight, we may as well not bother looking at any of them, because
I don't think we're going to get percentages higher than 54% very often. But for me, that tips it the other way. I may have not explained it very well, but 54% is definitely one way. It's not under, it's over. So it's in favour of rejecting this application. That's what I feel. I have to say, we've got some concrete evidence. If we don't use it, I think we're on a downward spiral. If I could say about temporary, I don't class 40 years as temporary. There's not many people in this room will still be here in 40 years. I do apologise if anybody, yes, yeah, you possibly, yeah. But certainly we've got to think of the legacy that we leave. You know, we're making decisions now for 40 years in the future. I'm sorry, I can't live with that. Sorry about that. And that's all I've got to say.
Okay, Councillor Steele, thank you for that. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can draw people's attention to page 35 of 106 and item 2.1.1, there have been concerns raised by local residents that the BMV figures have changed through the life of the application and the full ALC report was not submitted initially. I'm a little concerned that a robust assessment has not been made of the grading of the agricultural land. Could an officer reply to that? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, initially the documentation wasn't submitted, so it was sought by officers. So we didn't have an accurate picture in the beginning. The additional information was sought, that was submitted to us through the ACL. Now we have an accurate picture, as far as you can get an accurate picture with the sampling that's done across the site. So in terms of what we are proposing, that's where the 54% detail comes from. So that's how we're able to share those percentages with you this evening, because we do have that detail now. But it is correct that it wasn't submitted with the first when the application was first received, but has now been received and is assessed and put before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Any other member wish to make any comments or observations? Okay, members, I'm minded now to move it to the vote. But before I do, I will, as Annette has asked me to inquire that you are all satisfied that you're in possession of enough information, enough facts to make a qualified decision. Is anybody going to speak contrary to that? Okay, thank you very much, members. So I'm now going to put this motion to the vote, and the motion is to refuse the application on the grounds as outlined by Councillor Cope. So repeat, the motion is to refuse the application. Those that are going to vote in favour of that motion, please signify. Thank you, members. Those voting against the motion. Thank you, members. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The motion is carried. The application is refused. And that brings to close that application. So thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you, members of the public, for showing considerable restraint through that debate. And thank you for everybody who was involved. Okay, members, the next application is number 23/00419/FULHH. This relates to Ellsfield Dunsley Drive, Kimber. Sorry, the name of the house I suspect is Ellsfield Dunsley Drive, Kimber. And this proposed garage and storage room to frontage retrospective front porch and single story extension to form a utility. And I'll ask, is it you presenting this? I'll ask Helen to present the application. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a detached property located on the end row of Dunsley Drive within Kinver development boundary. The applicants propose to construct a single-storey utility room to the south side of the site of the existing front extension and to replace the carport and garage which sit forward of the dwelling with a garage and a storeroom. The application also seeks permission for a retrospective front porch. Several neighbours' objections have been received in relation to the proposed garage and storeroom. In particular, its scale in relation to the dwelling, its impact on the street scene, its potential to become a habitable space, and its potential to overshadow the neighbours to the south, West Point House. Objectors also expressed concerns regarding overdevelopment of the site and the proximity of the property to the greenbelt and nearby conservation areas. The proposal would be lower in height than the eaves of the existing dwelling and would be finished in matching materials. Further, other properties along the street have garage structures that sit forward of the dwellings. Therefore, after full and careful consideration, the proposal would not be out of scale with the dwelling and would not have an adverse impact on the street scene or nearby conservation areas. As the site is large, with the proposal would be being constructed over the already developed area, it is not considered to result in overdevelopment. The garage and storeroom were reduced in height during the life of the application, and all windows on the first floor level serving the storage room were removed. This is therefore left to us to consider that there would be use of this space would not impact on the amenity of neighbours due to its distance from the principal elevation of West Point House. The garage and storeroom would not result in a material reduction in the daylight from this neighbour. As the property is not located within the greenbelt and the proposal would be constructed over an already developed area within a residential curtilage, the openness of any nearby greenbelt land would not be impacted. It's therefore considered that permission should be granted for the proposed garage, storeroom, utility extension and retrospective porch, subject to conditions. So just to give members a little bit of context, there's some photos here of the application site from the highway on the left-hand side, and then within the site on the right-hand side. So you can see where the cars are parked on the right-hand side. This part of the building already projects forward of the front of the house towards the highway. And these are property views from the rear towards the neighbours. This is quite a helpful plan, so you can see that it's the main property itself here. There's already built development here, and it's just to be updated and amended and increased. But you can see that there's front development along Dunsley Drive as existing. These are the proposed plans. This shows the area to be developed where there's an existing carport as it is. The reduced height there, so there won't be any habitable accommodation located within that, which I know was a concern and was a concern for the case officer, hence getting the scheme reduced down in size. Application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The members, you've heard the applications presented by Helen. There are two speakers. Speaking against Mrs. Susan Capon, who describes herself as a neighbour. Mrs. Capon. Thank you, Madam. You have 3 minutes.
I'll try. Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. I'm speaking as the owner of West Point House, and I represent the owners of Highfield House, the two neighbouring properties. We have no objection to converting the existing carport and single brick garage into a flat roofed double garage with storage space alongside, as proposed in the planning submission in 2015. Giving the ground slopes down and away from the property to the south side, and that the proposed development extends right to the boundary of Earlsfield, a structure of 4.55 metres high will be overbearing and have a significant impact on the street scene and West Point House, which is at a considerably lower elevation than Earlsfield. This is not the case with other properties in the road, as none have development located along the entire front boundary, so we reject point 2.4.2 in the planning officer's report. All other properties in the road were in place before 2018, and this proposal goes against the South Staff's own 2018 guidance on planning. Point 2.4.4 is incorrect. The current garage is 2.2 metres tall at the boundary. The proposed development would see this height more than doubled to 4.55 metres, an increase of 2.35 metres, not the 1.8 metres in the planning officer's report, significantly underestimating the overbearing impact the development would have on West Point House and the wider street scene. Point 2.4.7, Elsfield, as with most properties along Dunsley Drive, has a long, narrow garden, with the property confined to the first 30% of the land area. The proposed development would see an increased footprint within this developed area rise from 30% to 55%, which we feel does represent overdevelopment. Again, we would have no objection to a bricked double garage with a flat roof and a storage structure at the end of the garden where there is already a large shed. It is important that the committee understand that in 2021, when plans for a single level rear extension were proposed for a dependent relative, the owners of Elsfield approached us, discussed and shared their plans. Independently, both neighbours did not object because the owners gave us their word that screening would be incorporated to preserve our privacy. This has not happened and our privacy has been completely disregarded. On submission of the current plans, there has been no attempt to discuss these with us. Now that there are 4 generations living in Elsfield, we feel the proposed floor plans are a Trojan horse for the further development of a habitable dwelling, which would represent overdevelopment of the site and not in keeping with core strategy policy EQ9. We request the committee takes into account the impact of developments on future harmony within residential areas. The proposed design, despite amendments, still lends itself to habitable accommodation, which is not what has been applied for. We would therefore urge that if the committee are minded to permit plans for a garage and storage space, conditions are imposed such that written approval from the LPA be required before the installation of a kitchen.
On that, you've gone there quite a bit over the 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, to interrupt there. And can somebody just turn the We have Councillor Paul Harrison, who also wishes to speak on this application. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Chair. And may I first take the opportunity of thanking the Chairman for allowing me to call this in for review and discussion. I appreciate that. I can also express my appreciation to the council officers who've been involved in this case, and as you've already heard, who have been involved in having some changes made to the original application, which I would applaud and think are very beneficial. Nevertheless, I still have some concerns really around points of policy EQ9 and EQ11, which have already been touched upon. I think at this point I would remind the members that this is the 3rd and 4th application in a very short period of time for this property, so there has been significant development already. The plot size is quite big, so technically in terms of overdevelopment that isn't the case. However, the building and development so far have of course all been at one end of the property, which immediately is adjacent to the road and therefore is relevant to its impact on the street scene. Obviously, I recognise EQ11 street scene is inevitably somewhat of a subjective issue, and perhaps photographs and even videos and plans don't necessarily give you the same impact and same impression of what's going on as actually being there and potentially living with it. So I would just ask members to bear that in mind. I do feel that this additional building at the front of the property, and really we're talking about the garage extension, nothing to do with the porch, which is retrospective permission, which I don't believe neighbours or I myself would object to, is out of character with the rest of the street. It is forward of the main property line. I think I would just say, if I may, that if the committee is minded to approve the application, then I would ask consideration be given, and forgive me, Chairman and members, if I'm getting this somewhat wrong, but this is my first time here, as I'm sure you're aware, but I would wonder whether the right of future permitted development might be removed from the property in order to safeguard further developments on this site that could adversely impact on the situation going forward. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and I've got a minute to spare.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Okay, we do have another ward member, Councillor Spruce. Do you wish to make some observations?
If I may, I just want to ask a question, just on the back of obviously what Councillor Harrison said there. Is it possible, again, as a relatively newbie, to add a condition in there that we could still, go with the report to approve, but in terms of permitted development, I think the worry and the concern is that obviously the permitted development you can kind of do a certain amount without asking plan permission. Is that the minute this is approved, the windows will go into the garage and the privacy will be invaded. So I think that's the main sticking point. I wonder if that is a possibility at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spruce. Helen?
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. Removal of permitted development rights is an option available to members. Obviously, we had a training session just before this about permitted development, which is very timely. We can't do it in a blanket fashion, so it would be remiss of me to say I can remove all permitted development rights. Although looking at the property, I suspect not many of them are left for the original dwelling, because as has been demonstrated, there's been a lot of development here already. However, if your specific concern is regard to the roof that's going onto the extension and the potential for Velux roof lights, for example, then yes, I would think that would be a reasonable condition for you to suggest, and we could add that to any approval. That wouldn't be an issue. Do you agree, Paul? That's fine. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Spruce. Anything further you want to say?
Just want to say thank you to Helen. I mean, if that is the case, I think I'm minded to approve it if that condition is in there. I think that's the main sticking point, that it sticks to what we've got here and there isn't any permitted development for that.
Councillor Perry?
Sorry, can I just ask a question? Could you put the map up on the screen, please?
Apologies, Chair.
So we all know exactly what we're talking about here, because it's quite a large area, and that's yes, that one would. I've got one in my map here, but seeing it on this, where exactly on there are we talking about this? Is it the one on the front? That one there? I thought it might be.
Can you see my cursor? It's just there. So that's where there is.
Can I just say from my point then, sorry, I'm looking at it now, and to be honest, I do feel as it's a bit of a blot on the landscape there on that corner. There is the potential, as has rightly been said, to put permitted development rights in there and to take them away. Do you know what I mean? Because it is another building, isn't it? And we all know what happens to these buildings. Sorry, we've been round this road before. We all know what happens when you get somebody come in. It might not be the people there now. It could be somebody at a later stage. Comes into the house, and before you know where you are, you've not got one, you've got two dwellings on there, and sometimes three. It depends on, and they're quite long gardens, aren't they, to be fair? I just feel that it is a little bit large for the street scene compared to the others that are down the street, if that makes sense. I'm just looking at my map now, this map here that I've got. That's just a point of observation that I wanted to bring up. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Perry, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, the lady objector was questioning some of the measurements that were originally put forward in the application. Can you comment on that, please?
Helen?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, so the measurements that are within the officer report have been checked and we're comfortable with those. They are based on the scaled plans that are submitted with the application. So if an approval was put forward tonight, it would be associated with those plans. Any deviations from that would not benefit from planning permission, and we could certainly look into that. The development, to be clear, was bigger than this when it first came in, and as officers we've had it reduced down. So what you're looking at there on the right hand side where those two vehicles are parked, that's where the development is. So there is already a building there, there's already a structure there. What we're looking to do in terms of changes is add that roof. That was higher and we didn't think that was appropriate, so now that's being brought down, and that's the discussion about the roof where we've said we could remove the permitted development rights for Velux windows. That wouldn't be an issue. I just wanted to come back on a point, if I may, Chair, that Councillor Perry raised. If it was to be converted into 2 or 3 dwellings, that would require planning permission in its own right. We would consider that on its merits. I can't say whether that building would be possible of conversion, I don't know. But for example, to go back to this, if we were to be looking at new buildings in the back garden, you know, without predetermining anything, it would be difficult to support, given you've got a uniform building line and there's a character issue there. But I don't think we could look at this and refuse it on what might happen. We have to be careful about that and look at what the proposals are in front of us today.
Thank you, then, Councillor Perry.
Can I just come back on? The reason I say that is looking at that map even there on the wall that you've got, the house, and I understand it's lower in ground level, the one underneath. Yes, is that, am I right in thinking that the one you got before, put the one, can you put the other map on? Sorry, that one. The one that's underneath, the house that's underneath, it's called West Point House, is it? Yeah, right. The one that's underneath, if you look, I mean, that's, and the land, bear in mind the land level as well, if that's lower, it is a huge impact on that property. Because it's so much forward, so it does. So I just want to make sure I've got it right in my head that that's what it is. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So this is the property to the south. That is at a slightly lower level, absolutely. So this is higher, but we have to be mindful of, one, there is a building there already. Granted, I accept that it's getting higher, but the impact has to be on residential amenity. Now, this is the driveway to that property. We protect outlook, daylight, habitable spaces and amenity spaces. A driveway isn't an amenity space. So yes, there will be an immediate change of outlook, of course there will be, but we have to balance that up against the impact on the occupiers. Thank you.
This question then is, apart from the moving the permitted development rights, is there any other condition that you can put on there? Because I'm not the officer, you are. That you can put on there that would prevent any other issues relating to that, or is there not?
I don't think in terms of permitted development we've got to worry, because it's probably not got very much left, given the fact it's been considerably extended. And what we're looking at here is this development is forward of the principal elevation, and that immediately restricts permitted development. So I do agree that the Velux roof light removal would be justified and could be considered certainly tonight. I don't think there would be anything else I could recommend, because it's probably already quite restricted. And again, if we were to receive a planning application anyway, should further development go ahead, we could consider that. No problem.
Okay, does that satisfy your questions there, Councillor Perry? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Councillor Duggan.
Yeah, just to come back on those measurements, the actual sort of border between West Point House and Elsfield, how high above the fencing would the actual extension or the development sort of take?
It would be as outlined in the officer report. You've got to bear in mind that they do sit slightly lower, but that development is already on the boundary, because that carport, sorry if I go back to it, that carport already sits on the boundary with the neighbour. So you're looking at the additional height from the roof, which is hipped away from the boundary and hipped on all sides. So the ridge height is higher, but it's not immediately adjacent at its highest point. No problem.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a bit of an issue with retrospective applications, to be honest. I can't understand why there's an extension on the front of the property. I thought in general terms it was very difficult to get permission to extend the front of any property. And all the others haven't.
It depends on the character. We have to look at it on its merits. The character of this street, the properties have been subjected to either single-storey front extensions or original features that projected forward. So that's why we look at it in that context.
So there wasn't a porch there originally?
The porch, no.
So
that's been added on,
that
yes.
was built without planning permission?
Yes,
correct?
That's what they're seeking retrospective consent for this evening. Yeah.
But there's an extension to the left of it. It's on the front of the house. Well, did that have planning permission?
I can only refer to what's in the planning history in the report. I don't know whether that was part of the original house or whether that's been part of an extension or got approval or not. But that's not something that's party to this application this evening.
No, but it's still a retrospective application for something that shouldn't have been built, correct?
The application, the retrospective part is just the porch, yes,
Well,
not the.
It might be just the porch, but it was built without planning permission.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear, it's not the whole application that's retrospective, just the porch element. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Steele, you happy with that response? Any other members wish to raise any questions or comments or observations, members? Okay, well, I'm minded then to move to the vote and Councillor Spruce.
Sorry, Chair, may I just double check if we're moving to the vote? Are we including the condition about the permitted development? Is that part of this vote? It's not as it is in this report. I want to get clarity on that.
Yeah, because I think it's reasonable if you vote on the recommendation to include the additional condition, and officers will draft that. It's a pretty standard condition that would refer to that particular part of the permitted development order.
Cheers. Thanks, Helen.
Okay, Councillor Spruce, you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah.
Okay, members, so we're now going to vote on whether to approve the application or not. You've heard the application, you've heard the comments made by Councillor Spruce and Helen, and are you all clear what the application is? It's with that condition that's been mentioned. So, members, I'm asking those in favour of the application, please signify. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. The application has been approved. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to receive the monthly update report, which I suspect is with Helen again. Helen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Last for me this evening, I promise. So the update report is included within your pack of information that was sent out as part of the agenda. So in terms of key points that I wanted to raise this evening, we have got some procedural changes and updates and information coming out of DLUC. There is a training session on Thursday which will capture all of this for all members, but it's proposed changes on permitted development rights and also the way the local plan process is progressed. So we will be looking to deal with that at the training session and answer any queries and questions there. The permitted development changes in particular are quite extensive and lengthy, so we will try and do a précis of those for you on the night. In terms of training, we've done a training session this evening on permitted development, which has been the hot topic this evening. It is my proposal to run training sessions every other month. I think that's probably appropriate in terms of time, but please do feedback to me if you think that's too frequent or otherwise. I do want to do a dedicated session for members on trees and arboriculture for my arboriculturalist. I also want to do an ecology session and a conservation session. We're lucky enough to have 3 in-house consultees and specialists in those fields, and I think it would be a good benefit to do those. So I'll run those over the coming committee dates. In terms of workloads, development management are finding themselves quite busy at the moment, especially with regards to pre-application inquiries. They are on the up and on the increase. We'll discuss that more on Thursday evening outside of this forum. And then to go on to appeal decisions, 6 since the last committee, all of which went in favour of the local planning authority. I don't intend to read through them all as you've had them all attached, but any queries or questions, I'm happy to take those. But the only thing I wanted to finish with was to update you on the Crooked House situation, which I don't have that much of an update other than there is a lot of ongoing activity. Whilst the comms have gone quiet, I want to assure members there is a lot of activity going on in the background, including some upcoming site visits and meeting with the relevant bodies, including Historic England. It's very much being progressed in a positive manner, and as soon as we have anything more formal, we will update you all. But just wanted to say, just because the comms have gone quiet doesn't mean that the activity in the background has also. But in terms of the update report, the one final point, sorry, that I did mean to raise, the DLUC stats at the back are now out of date. There was an error made on the update of our stats for major applications that will be rectified in December. So I will be updating them at that point because there's inaccuracies being reported by DLUHC on our behalf. So I want to rectify that before I update those statistics for you. But that's it from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members wish to ask questions about the report just been delivered by Helen? Members? Remains for me to just bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your participation. It's been a lively debate. Thank you very much for conducting that in a dignified and respectful manner. I particularly want to thank Helen, who's had a bit of a battering this evening. So thank you, Helen, for fielding all those questions. Thank you, members. Have a safe journey home.